All right, why don't we kick this off? This meeting of our land use department boards and commissions. Welcome to everybody online. We'll probably go around and have everybody introduce themselves. I'm Carl Fortuna, I'm first selectman. To my left in the room here is Matt Puglisi, who also serves on the board of selectmen, and Scott Gigerich is online. And he's also joined us tonight. Looks like we have reasonably, and this is Jennifer Donahue. I'm sure you guys met earlier today. So I guess everybody here pretty much knows what we're doing here. We're, shortly after I came into office in 2011, we did kind of an informal ad hoc, board of selectmen ad hoc group to look at Meritor's Way. And I remember a few people who were on that committee, and they actually came up with the term Meritor's Way, that group. And that was an ad hoc of the Board of Selectmen. They came up with a lot of wonderful ideas. Hey, this is what we'd love for it to be. And some of it was a little bit maybe fantasy, but that's okay. We were allowed to dream, right? And then several years later, we received a brownfield area remediation grant. We called it a BAR grant. That's what it was called. Super competitive grant. I mean, there were only like 5 or 6 towns that ended up getting it. Was it, how much was it for?
I don't remember.
It was 100 or 200, somewhere in there. And we had a group called Civic Moxie, which is kind of a conglomeration of specialties in their group, come out, and they developed a few ideas. Also, we had a few of these types of meetings. That was probably in 2017, 18, maybe 17, like that. And here we are again. A lot has changed, obviously, since the pandemic. A lot more work from home, maybe a little less demand for Class A office space, certainly. I was just reading before I came here tonight on how the Hartford office space vacancy it's crazy high and going up. And they're talking about maybe seeing how many business buildings they can make into apartment buildings, but that is not an easy task because office buildings are built very differently. So anyway, so we decided that we would undergo an RFP, and we did, and there were 5 responses to that RFP. Camoin was one. Camoin was chosen by the group. Matt was on that group, Chris Costa, Jennifer, Bruce Carlson, and I sat in, but who am I missing? I thought I was missing someone else, maybe not. So Camoin was chosen. They've had a busy day today, I know that. And we appreciate their time today coming down, getting a sense for the area. We all know what the area looks like. We're not looking to take anyone's property. We're not looking to, kick anyone out. We're looking to make it a better place for business. There's some vacant properties there. There's some properties that have come on and then they go away. When Hunter's ambulance came in a few years ago, I'm like, oh, good start. And, they're not there anymore. But there's been some activity there recently. Obviously, there's some buildings under construction, but there's also some folks who've gone in there with some pretty active businesses. So, and we also know that there's some good land available. Some of the land might be brownfields, but there's also opportunity for brownfields. We have to try. That's the point. We have to try to make grow smart. This would be considered infill. We're not going out and cutting down trees. So that is also a good thing. Better use of the property, and see what the market brings in 2023, post-pandemic, in the world we live in now. So I want to thank you all for being here. So what I'd like to do is, I think we'll start with introductions. Why don't we start with the Camoin team?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm Daryl Booker, project manager with Camoin, and I'm the project manager for this project. So, just glad to be here. Got to visit some of the areas and get a good sites. Had some good focus groups and some interviews this morning, so got a really good understanding of what the business owners and property owners are wanting to see.
I'm Dan Stevens, Director of Real Estate Development Services with Camoin. I'm based in upstate New York. If you don't know us, we are an economic development firm, so that's really what we specialize in. And we work mostly in the Northeast, although a little bit more broadly these days, working closely with Daryl on this project. So,
Paula, why don't we go your direction there?
Paula Kay, member of the Planning Commission.
Dennis Tilbury, alternate planning commission. Dave Prendergast, chairman of Economic Development Commission.
Nick Prevost, Chair of Planning, and I also sit on Economic Development.
Sandy Roberts, Economic Development.
Michael Bender, I'm a member of the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Commission as an alternate on both of them.
Justin Terabile, alternate on zoning. Puglisi, Board of Selectmen.
Jennifer Donahue, Economic Development Director.
Chris Costa, Town Planner.
The esteemed Chris Costa. Just since it's a small crowd, if you don't mind, we'll, in the room, we have Renee Root, who's a business owner and also sits on our police commission. Carol Manning, who also sits on our police commission. Jim Darian, who is a stalwart at our transfer station, town employee. And Eric DeSalt, who sits on our Board of Finance. So these are the folks in the room. Online, we have Scott Giegerich, as I mentioned, Mark Caldarella, I don't see any pictures, but Mark Caldarella, who's chairman of our zoning commission right now. Megan Jalflis. Megan, do you want to introduce yourself? Because you have multiple roles.
Sure. Hi, Megan Juplis. I am an alternate on the Planning Commission. I'm also the Deputy Director at RiverCog, which is the Regional Council of Governments.
Who else, Chris? Bob Friedman, who has been a long time. Bob, how many years on the zoning commission?
33.
And chairman for many of those, more recently not, but a wonderful person who's given a lot of his time to the town. Paul Connolly, who sits on our Harbor Management Commission. And is that everybody?
So we tried to promote all the participants who are commission members to panelists, so.
We have Amory Thorson, who is currently a member of the zoning commission, and Kathleen Sugland, who's a member of the planning commission. I see JT Dunn is on the phone. JT Dunn is a business owner in the area, and I don't know who JL is. Does JL want to introduce themselves? Okay. Anyway. So, do you guys, Chris, do you want to do any introduction or anybody else, Jennifer or Chris, or want to turn it over to Camoin?
This fruit base outside on the softball.
Okay.
All right, why don't you begin? Anyway.
Okay, we'll decide where the best place for it is. That's perfect for now. Yeah.
If you're online, mute yourselves, please, so we don't hear your conversations.
I think you summed it up. Sorry, I was trying to mute everybody and make sure everybody was where they need to be. I'm also the clerk tonight, so another half.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming this evening. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking at you. Really, tonight we want to hear from you. And so that's really what this is all about. But we'll talk just a little bit. I know, Carl, that was a great introduction, so I know I don't need to go into too in-depth here. We'll pull this one up. Just to get everybody refamiliarized with exactly what our study area is, essentially the TIF district that exists now. around Boston Post Road. So we're at I-95 down to the railway corridor, as you see on this map. So this is really our focus area, but of course, right, we never think in terms of vacuums. And so everything around the local community, the region, that's all context that we're looking at as part of our work. Goals of the project, not to study Mariner's Way to death. It's to, you know, as Carl mentioned, right, since the last study was done, things have changed in the marketplace. We're now kind of, it's fair to say post-COVID, but we're coming out of COVID period, things are different. So we're taking a fresh look at all of the economic data, market data, really understanding what the opportunities are. And, you know, that's, what we do is, you know, we really look at what is feasible in the market. So really kind of a reality check on maybe some of the ideas that have been floated in the past and what's possible here. But goals, you know, certainly to spur redevelopment, private investment. You know, this is a revitalization initiative, and I think we're being very intentional about that word initiative. You know, it's not just another planning effort, but this is really something that's intended to be action oriented. And we'll talk a little bit about, you know, what that means, but there are some implementation activities that we'll be doing at the tail end of this, kind of depending on the way that strategy takes shape. But really the idea is to really come up with some detailed action steps, how we can really make things happen this time around. So develop strategies that create a district embraced by the community. So that's another filter that's important here. What's politically, what's feasible, given where stakeholders are, community sentiment is, and all of those kind of things. And as I mentioned, you know, really thinking about creating actionable items. So this is the work that we've been tasked with in a nutshell. And really, you know, we are in the first phase. And so, you know, we are kind of moving towards wrapping that phase up, but you know, we are deep into the research, analysis, information gathering. And today we have an opportunity to speak with a lot of stakeholders. Those conversations will be ongoing. In November, we will be doing a public meeting and opportunity for comment and input as part of this process. But as we move towards the end of the year, there will be this thick research and analysis report. So a comprehensive look at those market and economic opportunities for the study area for Mariner's Way. And then as we move into the new year, there's some things that we'll be doing, right? We're going to be taking a look, another close look at the previous plan. How does this align with what's been discussed before? Are there different directions that maybe we need to take this time around? And so we move into developing a strategy, working closely with Carl, Stephanie, and others, and Jennifer, sitting in front of me. And then, you know, as I mentioned, we move into that implementation phase. So, you know, we have an actionable plan at the end of this process. What are the things that we can help you all do as the town to advance some of these revitalization initiatives, activities on Mariner's Way? Before I move on, any questions that I can answer about kind of what our work is all about, what comes out of that? None. I'm going to turn things over to Daryl, but like I said, you know, really tonight we want to hear from you all, and so we've got some questions that we'll walk through. And for those of you online, I think we've got an option set up for you, so I'll let Daryl kind of set up with that.
I know we possibly discussed about doing small group discussions, but I think we have, you know, good number that we can maybe just have a broader group discussion instead of breaking out into small groups and be more mindful of the time. But for the online people, we do have kind of an online platform set up, which is called Padlet. So we can either get the QR code, which is right there. If you have a smartphone, you can scan that with that. And it'll be taken to a link that has all the questions that we're going to be asking the group. And you can type in your answers right there, and we can have those for you. But if you want to chime in as well, please speak up, and we'll definitely acknowledge you. But like Dan said, we want to hear from you. So kind of to open up things is, you know, me and Dan need to get a good understanding of the Boston Post Road area. So, just to get started, what aspects or what assets of Mariners Way do you value the most and why?
I'll just kick that off, just so people start talking. Obviously, transportation access, I think I know that might be a boring answer, but we've talked about a rail spur for years. I don't know if it's usable for the town or not. But I've always thought of it as an area that is ripe for development because it's easy on, easy off, no matter how you slice it. And Old Saybrook is known for being a little bit of a hub of a bunch of small towns around it. We have more commercial development than a lot of those other towns because people can get here pretty easily and pretty quickly. We have more grocery stores than we need probably, but that's because we service other towns. I think valuing the transportation access of it as the possibility of being accessible for businesses is important. And that's one thing I think is important in advertising.
Well, I also think it's an area that is underutilized at this point. We have the west end of town, which is being overridden with stuff, and we have nothing on the east end. So I think that's one way to look at this is how do you move some of that desire to this end of the town? That's one of the aspects I like of it. I think there's a lot of uses for the area, and it's probably the biggest underutilized area we have.
For a lot of people, it's a gateway to the town too. It's the
Right.
first thing that they're seeing coming off the highway. And right now, it's not very representative of what our town is.
I'm a relatively, a relative newcomer to thinking about this area. But what I value most is the marine feel of the area and the work feel. And I would think the access to, the ocean and those possibilities are what we would want to trade on. And I think that it makes it unique too, so.
Is there anybody online? Oh, we got a hand here.
Yes. Yeah. For many of us and other parts of the town, and for people who are subject to traffic jams on I-95 North, the Mariners Way is a parallel road to I-95 that gets you back on the highway closest to the bridge. And so what businesses are located along that stretch are not as important as paralleling I-95 to get to the bridge. And Old Saybrook only has two ways to get from the east side or the southern side, if you will, to the west and vice versa. If you're in Westbrook and you wish to cross the river, you have to take Route 1 or Route 95. There is no alternative to get you there. And so this portion of Route 1 is a sister to I-95 and will always be so, despite the fact that the Connecticut DOT has long-range plans to change the exits and on-ramps in the Mariners Way area. It's been 7 years since we heard of those plans and nothing's happened. However, they should be checked.
So going on that, the access from I-95, you said there's plans from the DOT to shut down one of those ramps, you're saying?
I believe so,
Or
Bob.
redesign it, or?
Bob, are they talking about eliminating that on-ramp to I-95 North?
Yes, they had planned to change the one close to Gladeview, and they had also planned to, I think, change the one near the Liberty Inn or whatever it's called now. That both of those, the off-ramp near Liberty Inn and the on-ramp near Gladeview were part of the DOT package of changes for 95 interchanges in Old Saybrook. I have a copy of the plans that I got from Bill Peace, a former selectman, who also worked for the DOT a long time ago. If I search for them, I may be able to find them. But they were called long-range plans then, and that was probably 2014.
Well, if Bill was a selectman, it was before 2011, so I don't know. I don't know when Bill retired from DOT, but I think it was prior to 2011. Nick?
Are they planning on closing the exits or?
Yeah, I think they were going to leave the on-off over by the auto mall
Okay,
and close the entry into town and the entry onto I-95 on I-95.
I thought something that those two were gonna like basically move to 154, so instead of having to like get off and come down Route 1, you just exit right on the 155.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Anything else has been
there
10
are
years
some
older.
plans out there.
Are you for those plans or would you?
What?
Do you agree with those changes or?
I haven't given it, probably, when you start closing ramps, people freak out, because it limits access. So I don't know that I am for it. I haven't really considered it all that much because it seems like a very long range plan.
Well, if we lost them entirely, it'd be a huge problem, but if they moved, then that
Yeah.
stretch of Route 1 would become a whole lot less valuable to any business that was there, or possibly could become less valuable, because you wouldn't have the traffic driving past it to get to the on-ramp. If you're a traffic-driven business.
Well, the off-ramp by the Liberty Inn is definitely dangerous.
Yeah,
We all know
there's,
that.
yeah, that part of it, too,
improvement.
yeah. Well, a lot of people would appreciate that one being.
Yes.
is there an off ramp at 154? No,
No.
not going that direction.
That's what I thought they were just gonna relocate it down there.
Elm Street would be the
Make it
next
a
one.
little more sense.
And the one that comes off over near VFW way.
Yeah.
Well, that's 9.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
That's 9, yeah.
Any other assets before we move on? Really critical things we can build on? We covered a number here.
It's just open space. It's one of the few places we just have a lot of sort of relatively undeveloped land in town.
One thing that I just mentioned is, talked about Mariners Way and you talked about the access to the river there and what is happening down there with the marinas and so forth. And the fact that, we just talked about the lack of commercial development in the east side. Maybe that can in some way connect all the activity on the river and so forth into the east side and in toward the downtown area, it's kind of transitional.
People coming from the marinas,
Right.
into town, how do we get them in?
Being on the EDC and the committee that worked on Mariners Way, we hashed over a lot of stuff for Mariners Way, including the connectivity from the town to up there with a like a bike path and I think like a sidewalk that went into the woods and kind of buffered the marsh, get you off of the main drag up around that way and incorporate a park, a dog park, the entrance to Route 1, making it look more like a boulevard, so it would be inviting instead of just a plain old turn. There's quite a few things I'm trying to retweet to bring all those things up that could be worth hashing.
Yeah, there was a boulevard, there was talk of a boulevard.
Yeah.
You have bike path
Bike path.
and you narrow, it's a huge state right away. Route 1, it's larger than normal, is what I understand, and so shrink it, got the road diet type of thing. And then you'd have room for other things.
Also closing some of the multiple entrances to businesses so that it would more
Less curb.
accommodate the bike path and the sidewalk and
I think the only other thing that hasn't been mentioned is it's based on its current zoning, and I have Bob here, so he'll keep me straight. But it's some of the only property that we have that we could have any sort of industrial zoning and use. And so it has value in the town in terms of not just adding to our residential side, but adding job opportunities to the community.
The speed limit along that stretch of Route 1 is 40 miles an hour. And if there's going to be differences in the businesses that would accommodate local as well as through traffic, I would recommend the speed limit be lower than 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's getting into this question. So what kind of improvements or changes would y'all like to see? And so speed limit reduction is one. Talk about the walkability, bike paths is another one. What other improvements do y'all want to see?
I think just connecting it more kind of into Main Street. It's really close to the train station and Main Street, but it's really getting over that bridge over the train tracks. It's not an easy thing to do in a car or on a bike, and definitely if you walk. So like, how do we kind of just connect that whole downtown feel?
Make it more inviting.
Yeah.
The one thing to think about too is some of the existing businesses. We have construction businesses, contractor businesses that, you know, kind of taking into consideration how a road diet is going to impact those businesses or people bringing their boats. You know, you make so much of a diet. How do you, how do businesses like Tilcon and tow companies and, there's quite a few construction companies out there. They're kind of hidden, but they're there and they're successful. You don't want to negatively impact them either by making such a narrow road. It makes it infeasible for them to operate or difficult.
What other changes, improvements? Anybody online has a improvement they would like to see?
Paul's got his hand raised.
Yeah, I would just say that, we're the harbor management, we're interested in increasing public access. And there is, the new railroad bridge is going to be built in the general vicinity. And there may be a way to connect this property to maybe a public access area in the area of the new railroad bridge. There's also, there's bicycle and walkway access is always important. So we're always looking for additional areas for public access.
So are you familiar with that? They're building over the next 5 years, the railroad Amtrak bridge that goes over the Connecticut River is over 100 years old. And so it's a massive project that's about to probably start probably could be in 2024. There has been discussion of leaving a section of the old bridge as kind of maybe a viewing platform or of some sort. I'd have to follow up with Amtrak to see if that's still on the pledges. But that would be an attraction. It'd be actually quite nice. Because the views, the views over there are great once you get to the river. It's very close to an area that's actually it's been a bar, restaurant forever. It's closed right now. It's been proposed for redevelopment several times. It used to be called Between the Bridges. It's a marina over there. Those views are the best in town, just about, as you look down the river. I mean, the river is an incredible resource to the lower Connecticut River Valley and particularly the old Saybrook. It's a there's a national heritage river. I mean, you guys probably know all about that. So
the lower Connecticut River Valley was named one of the 50 most beautiful locations in the country.
So it's, there's that, but
This is how you get there.
It's not attractive right now.
I was saying, like, and that, if you think of it that way, it's almost like that's like a national park. Like usually the entryways into national parks are like really built up with lots of desirable stuff there.
Anybody else online have any comments?
So I've been putting my comments into the chat, so you're getting those, right?
I mean, it would be nice to see a
So,
bike ped with tree line, a treescape. Obviously, I think that would, I don't know.
so the online chat, Megan, is
She's
disabled.
on the Padlet.
Oh, on the Padlet, okay. So we can't see
Yeah,
your
so those are captured,
comments.
yeah, those are captured.
So we don't have the chat on here because people say not nice things in the chat. They're like chat bombers. So, all
The Padlet.
right, Padlet see. We
Oh. Thank you. So kind of, saying along those same lines, as opportunities, what do you see would be a good redevelopment opportunity there? It'd be,
I have a question. What are the dimensions of the Mariners Way? How many acres is it? How long, how wide?
I don't know if I can tell you off the top of my head.
Half a mile?
No, I'd say it's gotta be 3/4 mile long.
Well, it's pretty substantial.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, basically it goes from
Yeah.
the four-way intersection to Gladeview. I think that's what we're calling it, right? Gladeview, the convalescent home.
It basically bends the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then whatever the state right of way is,
I know Matt mentioned industrial being non-industrial, so that's the opportunity that you want to capture.
Yes, I mean, it's a potential opportunity for them if there's market demand for that.
Is that the custom marine lot? Or is that?
The whole area.
Chunk of land is all.
There's a hodgepodge of zoning. So there's industrial, marine industrial, E4. And the way that the parcels are assembled, it's not as they used to go in, like in certain areas of town, you go along Route 1, it's all E4. This is mixed in. So it's not that simple.
So just so the group knows, we've had other meetings with Des Moines, a group of us, and we've mentioned the opportunities that electric boat General Dynamics might present in terms of the industrial aspect, but even the housing aspect of it, right? I mean, all you hear about them is how they're getting tens of billions of dollars invested into General Dynamics, and they can't hire enough people. So those people have to live somewhere, and they need contractors and businesses to, I imagine, build parts and.
Right. The whole supply chain.
Yeah,
To them
supply
as well.
chain, better way to put it, supply chain.
But from an industrial point of view, is the infrastructure there?
You mean water and sewer?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sewer's not.
Right.
Well, I think it depends on the scope of the industrial. I mean, our industrial zone allows for, a lot of different uses. I mean, it could be warehousing. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a full-blown custom marine machine type plant. It could have other supporting uses that may not need sewer.
I mean, personally, from an industrial standpoint, I'd like to see something that's a little bit more modular, flexible, so that people that want to start a small business have a space to go to.
Like an incubator.
I mean, that was mentioned in the previous plan. I think that's still a value to that area.
Paul's got his hand raised.
Yeah, Mike, I would just say, harbor management perspective, we want to maintain as much marine industrial zoning that we can. We have another property in town that's at risk right now. But we want to attract marine businesses to the town to support a town that has more coastline than any other town in Connecticut.
You really don't have a lot of marine businesses if you think about it, unless it's a marina. So it's kind of interesting calling it Mariner's Way.
Right.
Because you would think it would be marine themed and have boat repair and places you buy sales or whatever else you need, but there's none of those businesses. Is that something everybody's looking to attract? I'm just trying to.
So I was thinking like a boat manufacturer or something.
But see, they're usually on the water.
Yeah.
Right.
And this, I can't get to the water, so you're like,
Direct access to the
lift it
water.
over the train tracks and go over private property. And I know some of the people over there haven't like that. So, while I hear about preserving marine industrial, I don't see any boat manufacturing happening there.
What about boat storage or, people pay a lot, we have Ocean Performance, we have people who paint boats, we have people
Yeah.
who, they go through, they do interior of boats, and there's a lot of supporting boating businesses, there's a lot of yacht brokers and other folks too, that may not need the waterfront, just kind of.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, you have Ocean Performance, you also have Greg's Outboard Repair right there. There are non-waterfront marine support uses that, again, would support the bigger community, in my opinion.
Is that a growing segment though? Because you look at Essex, and Essex got predominantly all the yacht brokers from around here.
Because some of them had no place to locate. I know we've had at least two that have moved out of
Okay.
here for different space,
Okay.
and I struggle to help them find locations.
Yeah, because they want to park the boat somewhere,
Not even necessarily parking the boat.
but a good location.
A good location with some traffic going by
Yeah.
and larger buildings,
I mean, that
or
would be
nicer
it.
buildings in some circumstance. You don't want to buy a $3 million boat from someone who has an ugly storefront.
Maybe some smaller boats, sport craft that people can afford.
Well, how about a multifamily development? Would you see that as a good opportunity?
Closer to the bridge. Yeah,
I mean, close to the bridge, you're walkable into downtown, you're walkable to the train station. Is a great TOD development potential. I think I
would agree.
I think it'd be a tough area to sell though.
Yeah.
From a living standpoint, because you're down below the bridge. It's not like you're up above.
I think if you reworked, like there's access to the train station from the other side of the
Yeah.
bridge was like nicer, because otherwise you have to go across a 6-lane of traffic just to get to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right.
It's tough.
Then
there's
the
no-
highway.
And yeah, highway, yeah.
But I think the town would, if housing was a possibility and some
Yeah.
people were interested, if we're interested. I mean,
Correct. Yeah, I didn't mean to say,
Yeah.
okay, housing there.
Yeah.
But you make
It's
it
just-
desirable to those people.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, the question is, would we be interested in it, or could we see it? Yes. How it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we have different ideas, like the marine piece,
Yeah.
industrial housing. I think we all realize like we have this big area and we want to figure out what's the best use for it, and it might be one of these three options and it might be something else because we don't want what the best use was 10 years ago. We want the best use for the next 20.
right. And I think we want to look at something that's best use that could actually happen, as opposed to
Right.
something that's more reading through these things, a nice wish list, but
Right.
I don't think it's conducive to the growth of Saybrook.
We had also talked about what could come into town to keep our young folks busy and bring people into town. One of the things I saw quite a while back on the internet was this gaming place, much like they have those trampoline parks now, but it was a digital thing where you could dance on the floor and it changed colors, or you play different games and all that, in a larger scale. Another thing would be a sports orientated thing. We've got a great soccer team in Old Saybrook, and to be part, if we have the acreage, that you could develop something like that. I remember taking my grandson to Barrington, Rhode Island, and it was just like phenomenal, fields everywhere. Businesses really prospered because of the influx of people. On a youth end of that, something, again, an idea, know what's
I think it's a good
possible.
idea. I know a lot of families do.
I know how much
Kids,
money
where's the
they
nearest
spend.
indoor soccer place?
Watermelon.
Yeah, so. So
Tell
it's kind
her
of
your
an indoor soccer.
Spend a
indoor
lot of time there.
fields. You could do a lot of stuff with that.
Brentford has a, what do you call those bubble things?
But they have adult leagues too at Montville.
Yep.
So it's not just children.
Yeah, just, I mean, just like soccer
Yeah,
fields
it's
inside of a
multi-sport,
warehouse.
Lacrosse, basketball
Yeah.
tournaments, volleyball tournaments.
They do birthday parties, they'll set up like
Yeah.
ninja warrior courses inside.
And a lot of that would incorporate, a great amount of water and sewage and
Yeah, right.
all that because it's.
Yeah.
It's
Just a feel.
basically repurposed warehouse space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's complementary seasonal to when we are busy and when we're quieter.
The one thing that, I'm sorry, there's one thing that I experienced in the earlier workshops for Mariners Way was that there was a certain contingent that was interested in large format retail. And the majority of the participants and the final draft basically steered away from large format retail.
we had several, public meetings and there were quite a few strong opinions on those large, corporations coming into town. And I kind of have to agree that, in my opinion, that it would really be too industrial and take away from the flavor of the town. We need retail. We've got Big Y and Kohl's, Marshalls. I mean, smaller retail like that, I think would be really well accepted rather than huge big box stores.
It might be well accepted, but can it be supported?
Well, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we struggle with. I mean, that's what retail struggles, right?
Yeah.
The other thing to think about too is I know at least one retail store that's looking at cutting their space in half because it's not marketable and they do better on their online sales. So they don't want to pay the utility bill. They don't need that space. So is that going to be a long-term sustainable solution where people just go on their phone now and they can buy from that store and have it delivered to their door?
Well, on that same note, like Amazon, you could open up a warehouse. I mean, that would.
Oh, there's no space for Amazon. That's what you were saying, Nick, about like repurpose.
Well, they're also space. They're not even using some of the warehouses they built in Connecticut.
Right.
We need an airport.
No.
Configurable smaller spaces, I think, like, versus like a big box building can only support other big box buildings.
So I think that's a little bit about what you guys do though. I mean, I think,
Megan's.
I mean, these are ideas, but go ahead, Megan.
I was just going to chime in that our previous discussion talking about bikeability and walkability and making an area that's welcoming for people isn't really aligned with huge retail developments either. That doesn't really give you the human scale that you would want to see in a welcoming area.
Okay. So kind of looking at within the town, what can you as town commissioners, town officials do different? Or what can y'all do better to help spur redevelopment?
So I'll kick that off too. Well, obviously, well, I mean, just to, spur conversation, but else, I mean, we thought about this and, we created the tax increment financing district, which we are putting money aside. Not a lot, but we have some money in the kitty for that. You always need to cover your soft costs, your engineering and your civil engineering and all that. So we have some money put aside. What we've never done is offer tax abatements. The town has never done that. I've been approached a few times by businesses saying, do you do that? That just, at the COG, we frequently talk about, and in Connecticut, we try to eat each other's own, oh, we got that store from Westbrook, when we should be talking about the health of the region, right? We could, so what, I guess to answer the question is, what can we do? One of the things we have done in the past is we've gotten a grant. We received a grant for brownfields, to determine how dirty the custom marine property is, okay? And we received a grant from, I don't know if it was Department of Economic Development for $165,000. We hired a company to go in and they produced a report. what we didn't do is do the remediation part of it, because we're willing to do that, is apply for a remediation grant if there's a deal, but not to just benefit the current property owner who may sit on it for another 10 years and say, oh, my property's that much more valuable now. So, Matt works for the state of Connecticut, and he and I have talked, about, this whole process here, and if the right opportunities come, we have the end with the state of Connecticut. What he told me. Privately. But we talked about it, and obviously Matt's a professional, but he, that's what we can do is chase grants. We've gotten a lot of money over the years from the state, a lot. And we've delivered on a lot of those, our sidewalk grants, our what was it called? Brownfield assessment grant. And we're certainly willing to do a lot more, and there's money out there. We know there's money out there. Megan, at the COG, the COG is doing a lot with grants and regional grants, that may tie into this study. I don't know, have you guys connected at length at all?
No, we have not.
Megan, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the grants that the COG is pursuing there's multiple grants.
Yeah, we have a couple. So right now, the one that we already received is the Thriving Communities Grant, which is to do transit-oriented development plans at our 3 Shoreline East stations, as well as the Middletown Transit Terminal. That only just recently got underway, but one of the components of that is to do a capacity analysis of the land capacity. So what land is available, what the sewer, septic, and water capacity is for the site, what could the build out possibly be, then do a similar visioning exercise and regulation changes to go with the vision. The way I think that we could see it tying into Mariner's Way is we're kind of looking at a hub and spoke approach of TOD. So instead of just looking at that half-mile radius around the transit station, look at where you want people to get to or come from when they're getting on and off the train. And one of those areas we think would be Mariner's Way for Old Saybrook. Another grant that we are currently pursuing is the HUD Pro Housing Grant that we are asking for $2 million to do site-specific or area-specific housing plans in 6 kind of town center areas across the region, to be determined, but based on kind of the previous analyses that we did under our regional plan of conservation and development and our regional housing plan. So those are, I think, the 2 that relate most to this. We won't know for a while if we receive the Pro Housing Grant because it's not due until the 30th. But were there any others, Carl, that you were thinking of in particular?
No, I just want the group to know, and I think Camoin would do well to connect with Megan and Sam Gold, the executive director at the COG. Very active, and they take a regional perspective. Here we are in Old Saybrook, looking at Old Saybrook, but I think it's important to look at this as a regional effort also.
I think the proximity to the highways and the train, could be regional properties and businesses. That's I think that's the right way to think about it.
I didn't know.
I'd say because it's so close to the highway and the train station, this is a very regionally attractive piece of land in town.
Well, when you ask what could the town do different, that is relatively easy and straightforward. I mean, what you've done with Route 1 and the vast change with the addition of the sidewalks and the plantings along Route 1, that most recent couple of blocks has been just, I think, revolutionary actually, in terms of the appearance is just 100% improved.
Yes.
So, I mean, right out of the box, I mean, the first thing would be to fix up one, you know, to plant, to have I mean, there are all kinds of things you could do to maybe have incentives, paid and unpaid, to get businesses to respond, to fix up their frontage. I know, easier said than done, but still.
So along those lines, I mean, we got the grant more recently, but credit goes to the land use department for enforcing their regulations. And I know Chris is big on this in terms of better curb cuts and buildings being more attractive. And it's been building by building, but that Route 1 corridor from basically the intersection of Route 1 and Main to Staples, building by building is improving. And there's a couple ones that are tough to turn over, but you know, you have the Guilford Savings Bank and, you know, obviously multiple other properties, but the land use department over the last 15 years has been incredibly proactive there. So what we did recently is notable, and I think
Suddenly it's the tipping point.
yeah, I mean, it's more aesthetically, you notice it right away, but there's been a lot of plans in the land use department and credit goes to that.
I'm not, I believe that.
And we would do the same on.
The biggest stumbling block that we have on Route 1, and I think we may have it on Route 1 East, it's the property owners that don't care what their building looks like. They, you know, their tenants just pay the rent, they get their check, they're an absentee landlord. You know, that's a real struggle, is that they don't care to invest in their properties. I mean, there's one property on Route 1 who actually, they were forced to invest a little bit into the property and it's still vacant. And the one thing is that we also have tenants, and I think we have a little of this on Boston Post Road East, who they're actually doing things to buildings they don't own because the landlords won't spend money, you know, whether it's painting awnings or, you know, just cleaning up signs, and it's a tough thing for small business owners when the landlords just give me the check and they're like, but the sign's falling apart. And they're like, oh, well, it's your problem. And that's a huge, huge issue.
Well, you know, perhaps it's a 20-year horizon, and you start with having some incentive for one business or two businesses to do it, and then another business does it, and another one turns over, and
some just don't care, Paula.
Pardon?
They don't care. There's a hand, they just don't care.
Yeah.
What kind of bonds
Unfortunately.
do you do? You know, what kind of bonds?
We don't have a blight ordinance that applies to commercial property.
how about a contest? Or an award, or.
But when the landlords, you know,
Yeah.
in a different state, it doesn't really work that way.
I just want to add, I think one thing that the town can do better is we need to engage with DOT more on this project, because
On this
project, because we got distracted as a group when we started talking about exit and on ramps, and we don't know where they are strategically. The whole corridor is Route 1, so it's the state highway. And then finally, we have questions about rail spur possibilities and TOD development. And the most important thing is right now, DOT, the state just made the biggest investment in transportation in our history at the Bond Commission this month. And the state has also been, the last 2 years, getting more than our normal share of federal funds, because the state is getting really well positioned by getting ahead on engineering of projects, so that in August, they get extra money that the other states couldn't use. So I think it's been like $200 million over what we budgeted the past 2 years that have come in. So I think we as a town need to be actively engaged so we can figure out what the state wants to do here, and that they know that we have an appetite to do something.
Right. Because I
What
think
we're
that,
thinking matches what they're thinking, because that's
Right.
gonna,
Yeah,
because I think that would help also if they could clean up the road
Yeah.
themselves.
I think kind of what Paul was saying, if you start making it look nicer, then it starts to pick up steam on its own.
Mark,
Sorry, I was muted. to Megan's point with the transit-oriented development, one of the things I think that would be beneficial to the whole town for that area would be, one, public access, which is critical because there is access to the water behind some of those properties. You also have existing businesses that are operating now there that will continue to operate, and we need to find a way to support them. And most importantly, to draw additional businesses, whether they're service or retail, is some affordable housing. And any incentives that the town can provide to allow for incentives for true affordable housing in town that can support the individuals working in those businesses at a reasonable rent would benefit the overall town. So I think those elements should be part of the consideration as well.
Thank you, ma'am. So I know we're running up on an hour, so I wanted to kind of make sure we get to this last question. We kind of discussed it a little bit, but you know, what efforts previously have you done that you see have been beneficial? So kind of like the Route 1 where the incremental improvements by the each building. So what other efforts do you see have been beneficial and what could be kind of replicated in Mayor's Way?
Has anyone ever tapped into the TIP fund at all? Do the businesses know that it exists and what it's for? When you're talking about revitalizing facades and cleaning up.
There's not a lot of money in there. There's probably 75,000 or 75 to 100 probably. We have not actively engaged independent businesses along those lines.
Do they know that some of their taxes are going into this fund?
I don't know. I mean, I can tell you that when we passed the TIP ordinance, it was very well attended. And a lot of the business owners were there. I don't know how many of them have forgotten.
It's been a while.
What?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Yep. Good point. I mean, I think we've thought of it very much as soft cost dollars that when the town needs to make an investment, you know, one of the things that all towns struggle with is grants come out and they're looking for projects that are ready to go. And we've been very good as a town because we have money set aside in a capital non-recurring fund, and we've been able to tap money for planning costs and civil engineering costs. And we go get those grants and it's been fantastic. And we've gotten lots of grants that way. I have personally, and this doesn't mean it's town policy certainly, thought of this money as planning money, but you're 100% correct that there are other uses for it. And there's uses that include bonding for these you know, if we wanted to do a larger project.
So do you think if it was part of a promotional
Could be.
thing for Mariners Way to let these people know that there might be some money?
Yes.
I mean, that's really not a lot to start with, but.
It's not, I think that's a good idea in terms of promoting it, like.
Well, you were talking about incentives.
Particularly even long-term, like your tax dollars are going into a fund.
Yeah.
That could be used for, and just 3 bullet points type of thing. For those property owners to say, this is a reason why you should be investing in your property, and long-term we have plans, and you know, and as your values go up, there'll be more money in this fund. Yeah, no, it's a good idea.
Just one thing to point out, some of the same rules on Boston Post Road apply on Boston Post Road East. There's just not a lot of movement.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. I mean, whatever's haven't worked, that might be the most important question.
Well, we tried at economic development in 2015, 2016 to go back to what Chris said, which was we have different zoning within that whole area. And so we tried to come up with a more uniform zoning overlay. And the challenge that we had was we didn't have an end use identified. We were doing it without there being something that we were all clearly understanding what the end result was gonna be. So I think the fair way to say it is that everybody was guarding against what they hoped wouldn't happen if we made that change. But at the same time, the offense was not was trying to be very general and not very specific and forceful. So that was a lot of effort that went in from community boards and commission volunteers. That was a lot of hours, and it ultimately failed. And then that kind of sucked a lot of the energy out of the town board and commission interest in kind of pursuing things for a couple of years.
And I think there wasn't a lot of support from the business owners.
Right. Yeah.
So that, I mean, in the businesses, so it was, I think everyone agreed something needed to happen, but they didn't know the answer. There was a lot of ideas. It wasn't really as funneled into here's what we're thinking. And I think people were a little reluctant. They didn't really understand, the business owners. And I'm just gonna say the whole thing about trucks and large vehicles. What do you mean you're gonna put a median and make it a boulevard? How am I gonna, operate my business? And I think there was a lot of uncertainties and that buy-in wasn't there. And I think for it to be successful, it's buy-in not from just the boards and commissions, but the people who own the properties and the people in the businesses. Without that, we're not gonna be successful.
Anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Would it be advantageous to outreach to that group of people while we develop this?
Going on right now.
We are.
We are.
Yeah.
There were 2 focus groups
Okay.
today just for business and property owners that these guys led, and there's also been, personal interviews been ongoing, so yeah.
Mass mailings, I mean, there's quite a bit. And that happened the last time, but it wasn't. I think it was more, go ahead, Bob.
I reviewed the zoning commission minutes from February and March of 2016 regarding the application for Mariners Way. And in those minutes, it says that there were 12 property owners submitting a letter of opposition to the zone change that would have affected their properties. And then a parallel concern that came up, I believe, mentioned by Mr. Royston in those meetings, was that if a property were to be switched from B4 to the Gateway Business District to restricted business B3, that they felt their properties would be would suffer from a decrease in the value of what they could do with their properties, especially if they had purchased as a B4 property and then had it changed to a more restricted use in a B3. And so those were aspects which were part of the zoning meeting, public hearing for the proposed text change that came out of Civic Moxie and the EDC and the whole previous round of study in 2016. And so I appreciate trying to have a more general approach toward the district and the impact. And I think a review of the existing uses possible in the B4 district would be in order. And the industrial district has some overlap with what's possible in a B4. And you have to figure out where to pick and choose among those, right? In the interim from 2016 to 2023, the zoning commission has reduced parking requirements in commercial uses, and the zoning commission has, let's say, allowed for the possibility of drive-through restaurants, but we're still fine-tuning that. That's not yet settled. And so there are opportunities which were previously unavailable, which will be available, if not already, they will be in 2024.
I know we're over a little bit, but, I just want to give you kind of our next step, so you know what to expect. So, we're still gonna be conducting some stakeholder interviews with, different property owners and some other, stakeholders. So definitely want to get up with Megan and the college to kind of, get their input and see what they have going on. Right now, we're in the middle of doing the, economic and market opportunity analysis, some of the data pools for that. We're scheduled to be back here in person for the public meeting in November. Is that still on the book?
So we're doing, our annual town meeting is always by charter, the fourth Monday of November. And I think it's Monday after Thanksgiving. We have it at 6:30 that night, but we plan on, getting a lot of people hopefully to come to that meeting, and we figured it'd be a good night to have these guys come too.
We'll be back for that, and then kind of moving into the new year, we'll start developing some strategies, and then get the final report done, and then, some actual steps of how you can implement the strategy. So that's kind of our steps moving forward. But before I close down, if we miss anything that you definitely want to make sure is.
I just wanted to add one thing. I've working with Chris and the others on the hazard mitigation plan update. And so it was just interesting to me that Mariners Way is one of the few parts of town south of 95 that has good protection from flooding. So even in a 1% flood, that area is not impacted. So as you can see, nearly 50% of the town would. So that's some type of value that, it's not an urgent thing, hopefully. But it's an aspect to the area that maybe goes unnoticed.
Any other last comments?
I actually think the comments by Matt on reaching out to DOT were important. I think it's a good idea. And I can try, good luck, right? See what their plans are, short-term, long-term, if those plans are still on the table, if they even foresee it happening, And if in fact, those exits were slated to be closed in 7 more years, that the entrance in and going out, but, I don't know how that impacts you guys. There are on and off ramps right around the corner, not that far away. And that's probably why they want to do this, and they're also not that safe. So I'll, make an effort to reach out to DOT.
Dan, anything from you?
No, thank you all. Appreciate it, taking some time. So Carl, they all know how to get in touch with us if any of their thoughts that pop into your head, we want to be accessible, so go do that.
How much of the previous work done on Mariners Way have you researched? Have you gotten anything out of it?
That's in our next phase, actually. So we're going to do a good analysis of that previous plan, just to make sure that, we take some of the good parts of that, and then, leave out the bad parts and kind of make sure our plan is building upon the good part. So, yeah. I think we're planning to do that in November.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Bob, do you have
Bob, have a question?
Bob, is your hand still up, or do you have a question?
No, sorry, I take my hand down.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.